Running a game can sometimes feel like spinning plates while juggling swords. It's exciting, but it's also exhausting. And if you've ever had a campaign stall out before it ever really got going, you're not alone. I've been there more times than I'd like to admit. For years, I blamed myself. I thought maybe I wasn't disciplined enough. Maybe I didn't have what it took to be a long-term GM. But recently, I came across something that finally gave me the right words for what it's been haunting me in my GMing for decades. Rick over Save vs. BS was talking about a Runehammer video he saw. Links to the videos in the description. And he kept using the phrase cognitive load. And that was it. That was the light bulb moment. Suddenly I could name the hidden enemy that had been sabotaging my campaigns all these years. In psychology, cognitive load is the total amount of mental effort your brain can handle at once. Think of your brain like a computer CPU. It's powerful. It can do many amazing things, but it only has so many processing cycles to give. Overload it and things start to slow down, lock up, and crash. For me, the biggest strain often comes before the session even starts, in the prep. Fantasy games give you shortcuts. An orc boss or a dragon can be sketched in with just a stat block and a name, maybe a quirk. But in superhero games, every villain feels like a dissertation. You're not just writing stats, you're building an origin story. Where did they get their powers? How do those powers work? Why did they choose villainy? What's their motivation? How does all that tie into a plot that will hook my players? And if you're running a team of villains, that weight multiplies almost exponentially. Now you're juggling backstories, power sets, and motivations for a half dozen characters, all the while weaving them into a coherent story. That's prep load. And that's the kind of weight that can smother enthusiasm even before you get to session 1. But it doesn't stop there. Prep is only one side of the coin. The other side hits during the session itself. At the table, you're tracking initiative, remembering NPC names, managing pacing, role-playing villains, answering rules questions, making sure every player gets spotlight time. You're juggling story beats, mechanics, group dynamics all at once. And while you're doing that, you're also handling side chatter, rules lawyering, and maybe the pizza delivery guy that just showed up in the middle of the combat. That's session load. The mental traffic jam of holding too many things in your head all at once, in real time, with no pause button. And here's the kicker. Not everyone's threshold for load is the same. For some people, it's higher. For others, it's lower. I live with long-term post-chemotherapy radiation-induced cognitive impairment. That's a mouthful. And that's on top of ADD. That means my buffer is thinner. It doesn't take as much to have me hit the wall where the CPU overheats and everything freezes. And that's what makes load so insidious. It's not just rules or prep or distractions, it's cumulative weight. And it hits us all differently. Once you recognize it, you start to see how it connects to so many struggles that GMs face. It's why campaigns stall before they ever find their footing. It's why worlds like Port Dominion feel heavier with every new faction and villain I add. It's why rules lawyering and raw culture piles bricks onto the GM's back. It's why the killer GM meme poisons trust and makes running the game even harder. Cognitive load isn't in the rulebook, but it's the real dragon that burns us out. Once I realized what cognitive load really was, I started seeing its fingerprints all over my own history as a GM. This has been my reality for years. I kept telling my family and my friends, this time I'm going to run a campaign. But every time I'd stall out, prep buried me, or their enthusiasm felt uncertain. Those two things fed off each other. It became a cycle. Every failed start made the next one feel doomed before it ever began. Prep overload fed hesitation, hesitation fed burnout, burnout fed failure, failure whispered in my ear, why even try? You'll just drop it again. The last full game I actually ran was 7th Sea by John Wick and Alderac Entertainment. We played one session, just one, The players loved it. They still remember the jokes, the characters, but for me, the prep had maxed out my mental CPU. I was so overloaded I couldn't even face writing session 2. And that's how load kills the campaign. Not with a TPK, but with silence. That's the cruel irony. The players remember the joy. They remember the laughs. They still talk about that session years later. But I remember the weight, the strain, the burnout that hit before the story even had a chance to grow. Players walk away with memories. GMs can walk away with scars. And once you've been through that cycle enough times, another enemy creeps in. Doubt. There's a voice in the back of my mind that says, sure, you say you're going to run a game, but I'll believe it when I am sitting at the table and the dice are rolling. My friends and family probably don't think that. They've never said it. But the darker corners of my mind insist they must. And that fear makes it's even harder to try again. There's another side to this that ties directly into cognitive load. Imagination itself. I've come to think of imagination as muscle. When you're gaming regularly, it stays strong. You're improvising, describing scenes, inventing characters, all those creative reflexes that get regular reps. But step away from the table for a few years and that muscle stiffens. Ideas don't come as quickly. It takes conscious effort to visualize, to invent, and to get into that creative flow again. And when that imagination muscle is out of shape, it adds to the load. Things that used to feel effortless now drain your energy. So you compensate with more prep, more notes, more structure, which just piles on more weight on your mental barbell. It becomes a vicious cycle. Creative rust leads to overload. Overload leads to burnout. Burnout leads to more time away. Yes, Master Yoda. But here's the twist. Like weightlifting, you need rest between sessions to grow stronger. Sometimes stepping away for a short while, giving your brain time to recover and integrate new ideas, to make imaginative connections that you couldn't see while you were grinding, you come back fresher, sharper, and suddenly that creative spark feels alive again. The trick is balance. Too much time away and the muscle stiffens. Too little rest and you tear it down faster than it can heal. The goal, just like in lifting, is to find that rhythm of stress and recovery that keeps imagination healthy and sustainable without letting cognitive load crush it. And just like imagination can tire and recover, so can the rest of your life's energy. Because load doesn't just come from the table, it comes from everywhere else too. Family, career, responsibilities, they all draw from that same mental bank account. The brain doesn't compartmentalize those cycles. If work's been stressful, if your schedule's packed, if your family needs your focus, then the energy you normally use for creativity and prep is already spent before you even touch a rule book. For me, as someone balancing a full-time career, family, and a handful of creative projects, I've learned that my mental CPU doesn't reset just because the workday ends. The background processes of real life keep running. So when I sit down to prep a game, I'm already running on reduced bandwidth. And when you mix that with an out of practice imagination or heavy prep expectations, the system hits critical mass fast. That's when the joy of the hobby starts to feel like another obligation. Another task on the list instead of the escape it used to be. Sometimes it's not that we've lost our passion for gaming. It's that life simply eats the mental cycles we used to have available for it. And unless we acknowledge that, we'll keep blaming ourselves for what's really just the reality of a limited bandwidth. And that brings me back to my own world, the one I've been living in my head and notebooks for years. Even now, my Port Dominion Villains and Vigilantes campaign, I can feel the weight creeping in again. The enthusiasm that burned so bright at the start is beginning to fade. Not because the world isn't compelling, but because I'm carrying too much of the load myself. And when I manage to get it to the table, I'm worried the overload will follow me there. I'll be juggling alliances, powers, personalities, trying to keep villains straight and roleplay them all. My CPU is already overheating before the dice even hit the table. And that fear gnaws at my excitement. This is why so many veteran GMs cut. They trim the rules, they ditch the mechanics, they strip away the fiddly bits that bury their brains. Rick from Save vs. BS put it perfectly. Every cut gives your brain more oxygen. And when your brain can breathe, the story can breathe too. That's why many veterans smile when they see a stripped down table. They know it's not missing anything, it's more free. The philosophy of cutting and freeing up mental space is exactly what drew me to a different system entirely. All of this has made me rethink what I want from a game system lately. I've been seriously considering switching over to Shadow Dark. And it's not because it's a new hot thing, but because it embodies everything we've been talking about. Lower cognitive load by design. The rules are lean, the math is simple. It's built around the philosophy of design the world as you go. You don't have to map every dungeon level or every NPC before session 1. You build it in layers as the story unfolds with the players. That approach trims down prep load and it gets your imagination to breathe again. You're not memorizing subsystems, you're improvising, storytelling, reacting in the moment. And when your brain isn't buried under rules lookups and binder pages of setting lore, the magic comes back. For me, that's incredibly appealing. A way to reconnect with the creative part of GMing without the burnout. Maybe the answer isn't giving up on gaming, but finding systems that work with our brains instead of against them. All that being said though, I don't think I'm quite ready to give up on my Port Dominion campaign. And maybe it's because I've managed to name the enemy. But I'm beginning to feel the weight lift. But I'll see what happens as I go along, but I do anticipate a few changes in the near future. What's funny is that even the designers of D&D 5th edition said the spirit of the game was meant to be rulings and not rules. If something wasn't clear, the GM was supposed to make a quick ruling and keep the story flowing, and then look up the rules later. That's a brilliant way to keep load low. But in practice, that's not how I've ever seen it play out, especially with younger players. I've noticed the opposite, a devotion to raw, rules as written. As if the rulebook was holy scripture. That devotion leads to rules lawyering, arguments, the game grinding to a halt. Instead of cutting load, it piles more on. The GM ends up carrying the heaviest weight of all, the pressure to get every rule exactly right in the moment while juggling everything else. And over the years, with all the rules bloat, it's only gotten worse, especially because all the majority of the new rules heavily favor the players over the GM, and the players hold on to those rules like a cudgel over the GM's head. And here's the thing. A lot of players are convinced strict adherence to raw is the only way to keep the GM fair. They've bought into this old meme of the killer GM, the idea that the Dungeon Master lives to kill characters or make players miserable. That RPGs are really GM versus player. From my experience, that was never true. Sure, some killer GMs existed, but they were the exception, not the rule. Most of us just want to tell a good story and make sure everyone had fun. But that meme stuck. And now a whole generation of players expects GMs to know the rules cover to cover, never forget a single modifier, and run the game like a legal document. And if the GM doesn't, they feel cheated. Even Matthew Mercer of Critical Role, arguably one of the most celebrated GMs in the hobby right now, gets criticized whenever he forgets a rule or misapplies something. He's not immune to the pressure. If he's not immune, what chance do the rest of us have? And that expectation is another kind of load, the burden of trust. It's not just notes or stats. And that expectation is another kind of load, the burden of trust. It's not just notes or stat blocks weighing on you. It's the constant need to prove you're not out to get your players. And that can be just as crushing as any binder of lore. Cognitive load isn't just about rules prep. It's the hidden enemy that kills campaigns, not with drama, not with TPKs, but with burnout and silence. It makes you doubt yourself. It convinces you your players don't believe in you. It strangles the joy of the story before it ever has a chance to live. But here's the hope. Once you can name it, you can fight it. And fighting it means cutting the weight, lightening the load and giving yourself permission to enjoy the game instead of drowning in it. So, theory is all well and good, but what do we actually do about it? So the question becomes, what can we do about it? First, we can cut deliberately. Every mechanic, every rule, every bit of lore, ask, does this serve the story or just the system? If this doesn't lighten your brain, trim it. Your story won't suffer, it'll breathe. Second, share the load. If you've got engaged players, and God, it's nice to have engaged players, give them small world building roles. Let them name the tavern, describe the NPC, or track initiative. The table's a collaborative space. Use it. Third, less prep, more play. Try one-page dungeons, random tables, modular encounters, tools that keep you flexible. The goal isn't perfection, it's momentum. Fourth, protect your recovery time. Creativity thrives on rest. Schedule breaks between sessions. Don't feel guilty about a gap week or a pause between arcs. Remember, even in weightlifting, growth happens during recovery. And finally, start small. Run a one-shot. Use pre-made materials. Build confidence first, and then scale up later. The smaller the load, the faster you rebuild your creative muscle. The sooner the joy comes back. The truth is we can't eliminate cognitive load, but we can manage it, lighten it, and make sure our limited cycles go to the parts of gaming that feed us instead of draining us. If you've had campaigns stall, if you've lost enthusiasm midstream, if you've ever made promises to run games that never made it past session 1, you're not alone. I've been there for decades. But now I know the name of the enemy, cognitive load, and naming it means we can finally fight it together. What's the one rule or mechanic or bit of prep you've cut from a game that made running easier for you and more fun? Thanks for watching. I guess we'll call this one done. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in Midnight's Lair. If this helped, hit like, sub for more Lair episodes, and ring the bell if you don't want to miss additional content coming soon. Thanks. Good night.